I grew up in a peaceful house until things changed. My name is Leah, and I was raised in what I thought was the perfect family. My father was the strong and hardworking pillar, always there for me. My mother, warm and caring, kept everything in order, from the meals we ate to the love that bound us together. They formed a perfect couple, defying the hardships of modern relationships. As I grew up, I admired my father. He was my hero. As a child, I followed him everywhere, helping him with little tasks like car repairs, mowing the lawn, or starting DIY projects he loved to begin but never finished. Growing older, our bond remained strong, but it evolved. Our conversations became more personal, deeper than the superficial teasing we shared before. We talked about everything: life, his dreams, my future, and sometimes topics that seemed too personal for a father-daughter relationship. But I never saw this as strange. Dad was just someone I could confide in. He was always there, even when Mom was busy or too tired to listen. We had this connection, different from the one I had with her, and I didn't really care until the day I noticed something strange. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and Mom had gone to see a friend, leaving me alone with Dad. Nothing unusual until then. We had spent time alone together before, but that day, something felt different. The way he looked at me, his smile when he spoke, it was almost as though he saw me not just as his daughter, but as something more. At first, I ignored it, convincing myself that it was just my imagination. After all, Dad had always been kind and caring. But over the days, little details began to accumulate. The way he brushed my hair from my face when I spoke to him, his hugs that lasted a second too long, or his increasing desire to spend more and more time by my side. Nothing blatant or inappropriate happened, but there was a tension between us that I couldn't explain. It was subtle but undeniable. I began to wonder if I was just imagining things, perhaps dreaming up this strange dynamic. Yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Soon, it became evident that I wasn't the only one noticing these changes. Mom had started to act differently too. She was becoming distant, watching us closely whenever Dad and I talked or laughed together. I could see the suspicion growing in her eyes, but I refused to believe that something was wrong. Yet, the atmosphere in our home was changing. The once warm and loving environment was becoming tense, filled with unspoken words and lingering glances. And even though I wanted to maintain normalcy, I felt caught in the middle of something I didn't fully understand. Weeks passed, and the tension in our home escalated. Mom's distant looks turned into icy silence, and Dad became increasingly drawn to me in a way that was hard to define. It was tiny gestures, almost imperceptible, like him standing a little too close when we talked or finding excuses to be near me for no real reason. It made me uncomfortable, but I continued to ignore my feelings. After all, he was my father. He would never cross a line.
No.
One night, after dinner, Mom abruptly stood up and announced that she was leaving. It wasn't in her habits to go without telling us where she was going, but neither Dad nor I asked questions. As soon as the door closed behind her, I noticed a change in Dad's behavior. He seemed relieved, almost excited, and suggested we watch a movie together. I tried to act normally, but something about being alone with him felt different, as if there was an invisible line between us that was slowly fading away. Sitting on the couch with the movie playing softly in the background, I could feel his gaze on me, not as a father looks at his daughter, but in a way that made me self-conscious. My heart raced, even though I didn't know why. I kept my eyes fixed on the screen, trying to ignore the growing discomfort in the room. Suddenly, Dad leaned over and placed his hand on my shoulder. It was an innocent gesture, but it felt heavy. His hand lingered, and I could feel the warmth of his touch spreading across my skin. I thought to myself, I didn't know how to react. He didn't move his hand and turn toward me, his face closer than ever before. "Leah," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "you know I'm always here for you, right? You can talk to me about anything." I nodded, but my throat was tight. Something about the way he said it felt different. I wanted to believe he was just the protective father I had always known, but deep down, a part of me wasn't so sure anymore. "Is everything all right?" I asked, hoping to steer the conversation back to something normal. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine as if he were trying to make a decision. Then, as quickly as the tension had built, he withdrew his hand and smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course, everything's fine," he said, standing up suddenly. "I'm going to check something in the garage." As he left the room, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My mind was racing. Was I imagining things? Was I exaggerating innocent moments? I shook my head, trying to dispel the doubts flooding my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore how my body reacted every time he was near me, nor that strange feeling that we were on the brink of something that wasn't right. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed the events of the evening over and over in my mind. I didn't want to believe that something inappropriate was happening. After all, Dad hadn't done anything, at least nothing explicit. But my intuition, deep down, told me that something was changing, and not for the better. The next morning, Mom was even more distant. She barely spoke to Dad, and her conversations with me were curt and sharp. It was as if she knew something but wasn't ready to face it. I sometimes caught her looking at me out of the corner of her eye, her face tense, as if filled with unspoken questions. Days passed, and the growing distance between my parents became more and more evident. They talked less, barely touched, and showed no affection. The home that once echoed with laughter and light seemed to collapse in on itself. The cracks in their relationship widened, and I had no idea how to stop them. Then one afternoon, Mom approached me while Dad was at work. Her face was etched with worry, and her voice unusually soft. "Leah," she began hesitantly, "is something happening between you and your father? Something strange?" I froze. Her question hit like a weight. Was she accusing me of something? Did she think I was doing something wrong? My mind raced trying to find the right words. "No, Mom. Nothing is happening," I responded quickly, though I wasn't sure that was entirely true. Nothing had happened, but something was definitely different, and we both knew it. She scrutinized me for a long time, as if trying to guess whether I was telling the truth. Finally, she sighed and nodded, but her expression told me she wasn't entirely convinced. "Okay," she said softly. "I just wanted to make sure." As she walked away, a heavy weight settled in my chest. The cracks in our family were no longer just beneath the surface. They were there, glaringly evident, threatening to tear us apart. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that a tragedy was brewing. The days that followed this silent confrontation with Mom felt like living in a pressure cooker. Dad became even more attentive. His presence was suffocating, and Mom's distance turned into outright avoidance. We were no longer a family. We were three strangers in a house filled with unspoken truths and invisible barriers. I felt caught between them, torn by the weight of my father's behavior and the silent accusations of my mother. Then one evening, it all collapsed. It was late, well past dinner, and I was already in bed when I heard my parents arguing in low, angry voices in the living room. At first, I tried to ignore it, pulling the blanket over my head, hoping their argument would die down like always, but the tension in their voices pulled me in, knotting my stomach with fear. I slipped out of bed and crept to my bedroom door, cracking it just enough to hear what was being said. Their voices were clearer now, sharp, cutting through the silence of the night. "You think I don't see what's going on?" Mom's voice was cold, but her anger simmered underneath. "The way you act with her, the way you avoid me. You think I'm blind?" "Linda, stop, you're overreacting," Dad replied in a calmer, defensive tone. "This is our daughter. Nothing's happening. Don't lie to me, Richard." Mom retorted, her voice trembling with fury. "I see how you look at her, and I've seen how she looks at you too." My heart tightened. Did she think I was a part of this? That I wanted this to happen? "I would never hurt her," Dad insisted, his voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. "You know me, I love her, but it's not like this. Not like this." Mom's voice broke. "I don't know you anymore, and I don't know what's going on between you two, but it's not normal and it's not right." I could hear the tears in her voice. My chest tightened. This was the moment when everything was collapsing. I knew I had to intervene before it got worse. Without thinking, I stepped out of my room and walked toward the living room. As I approached, they turned to me, surprised, their faces frozen in a mix of guilt and shock. "Mom, Dad, stop," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "Nothing happened. Dad didn't do anything." My mother's eyes narrowed, filled with suspicion and pain. "But you know that something's not right, don't you, Leah? You felt it too?" I hesitated, and that hesitation seemed to confirm her worst fears. I could see the betrayal in her eyes, and it hurt in a way I hadn't expected. "I don't know what's going on," I admitted, my voice trembling, "but it's not what you think. Dad and we were just—" I paused, searching for the right words, but they didn't come. Dad stood there, silent, as if he knew there was no way to fix this. His face was pale, his eyes empty of regret. He looked like a man who had lost everything without realizing it. Mom stepped closer to me, her voice shaking with emotion. "Leah, I love you, but I can't ignore what I saw. There's something between you two that shouldn't exist. It's not your fault, but it's not right either." Tears filled my eyes. I had never wanted this to happen. I didn't even know what was going on, and that was the truth. Something strange had slipped between my father and me without my wanting it or understanding it, and yet it was destroying everything. For the first time that night, Dad spoke. "Linda, please, I never wanted this. I love you both, but things are messed up, and I don't know how we got here." Mom shook her head, her voice both firm and broken. "It's too late, Richard. I can't trust you anymore, or trust this family." Those words hung in the air like a final judgment, and their weight crashed down on us. I felt suffocated by the pressure of a reality I didn't fully understand. In the days that followed, Mom packed her bags and left the house. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look back. It was as if she had already mourned our family long before she stepped out the door. Dad tried to apologize, to explain again, but there was nothing left to say. The damage was done, and no words could repair the broken pieces of our lives. I stayed with Dad for a while after that, but things were never the same again. The unspoken tension that had lingered between us for months became a permanent presence, a reminder of the invisible line that had been crossed, even if neither of us fully understood how or why. Eventually, I left home, desperate to escape the weight of the past. My relationship with my father remained strained, and my mother, well, she never really forgave me or him or the situation. Our once peaceful home was gone, replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any argument. Years passed, and while the pain faded somewhat over time, it never completely disappeared. My parents divorced, and I found myself caught in a rupture that could never be mended. I tried to move on, to build my own life away from the shadows of that broken house, but now and then I reflected on those moments, that silent tension, everything that had gone unsaid, and I wondered if I could have done something differently. Of course, I never talked about it with my father. We still spoke, but there was now a chasm between us that could never be crossed. My mother remarried, and while I resented her a little for what had happened, I understand now why she did what she did. The memories linger in a corner of my mind, recalling that time when everything shifted. We had been a happy family, a united family, until something indefinable slipped between us to shatter it all. Time passed, and the pain dulled, but it never completely disappeared. Every time I think back to that period of my life, a silent sadness washes over me. I grew up in a home full of love, but that sense of familial affection slowly extinguished, like a flame that's forgotten to be fed. The years went by, and although I built my own life, that time remains etched with a bitter memory. A part of me says that, despite all our efforts, some wounds can never heal completely.